Hello and welcome to this lesson planning screencast. My name is Robert Martinez and this is my methodology pill number 25. We're looking today at productive skills writing, how to plan a lesson where the focus is writing, where we want to develop our students' writing skills. Now here are some suggested stages. Let's start by looking at productive skills. We have speaking and writing. We've been saying that we would have three common stages to our lessons, especially when we have a text-based approach. And so basically all lessons would ideally start with a leading and warmer, followed by a pre-teaching vocabulary stage if necessary. We'll look at that in detail in a minute. And then skimming or listening for gist. Now, thinking about writing, let's look at some quick ideas on leading and warmers. Remember that a lead-in is like cutting the ribbon when you have a grand opening, and having a creative opening has a positive effect on learning because they increase concentration, you increase imagination, they stimulate curiosity, they foster motivation, and they develop creative responses. So the way you start your lesson and you lead into your lesson is obviously going to have an important impact on the subsequent parts of the lesson. Some ideas for leading and warmers could be Wordle, so having a word cloud. Wordle.net is a web application that you can use to make word clouds. So if you type in the text from your text or your listening text, then Wordle will create a word cloud that you can then use as a leading, as a warmer for your students by asking them to look at the word cloud and think about the content of the lesson or the topic, and then activate prior knowledge. You could also, before that, the word cloud doesn't necessarily have to have a language focus yet. So it's just warming them up and making them discuss about the topic and then making them think about the topic through that word cloud. Now, you could also have an activity called hot and cold where you give them some words from the text and then ask them to classify them into hot and cold words. Obviously, there are not right or wrong answers. It's just an activity to make them use their higher order thinking skills, hypothesizing, speculating, negotiating the meaning of the words and everything. You could also let them listen to a snippet of a song related to the topic to make them think about it and discuss about the topic. You could give them a few topic related questions. For example, if you're addressing food, then you would ask them what's your favorite food and why not, when do you eat it, where can you find it, etc. Also, you could have some visuals. For example, again, if you were talking about foods, then those visuals would help them think about foods, and you can ask them about whether they can identify those kinds of foods and whether where they come from, etc. Then you could also have some topic related noises. You could ask them to listen to the noises and then predict what the lesson is about or the topic is about or how they feel about them. For example, with clip art, there are lots of sound files for animal noises, traffic noises, and different kinds of noises that can make the leading and warmer of the lesson a little bit different and then also challenging, because you would make them make predictions and speculate and talk about the potential topics or themes of the lesson. Another idea would be to bring in realia, so props. For example, if you're talking about clothes, then you would bring in clothes to help students see it, see the real thing. You could also play charades where you mime the topic of the lesson, and then students in groups try and guess what the topic is. Or you could also have another activity called word colors. You give them some words that they have to then classify it according to the color they think the word has. Obviously, there are not right or wrong answers, but again, is making them use their brain and making them think and speculate and discuss in preparation for what's coming up. It would be pre-teaching vocabulary stage if necessary. Again, this is very important. Remember that we pre-teach vocabulary only if it is necessary, so that they can, because they need those 3, 4, 5 words to be able to answer the just question or the listening for detail or scanning questions. And so it is instrumental. It's not that it must be there. Sometimes you don't have to. Very important to know that how can we determine what vocabulary to pre-teach? Well, Jeremy Harmer says in that in his book The Practice of English Language Teaching, that those 3, 4, 5 words that would stop the students from being able to complete the gist task or the reading tasks or the listening tasks. So something I usually suggest is that you look at what your gist question is in the answer, and the scanning for detail or listening for detail questions and their answers, and then if there are any words in there that are that you think your students will definitely not know, then those are probably the 2, 3, 4 words that they need to know so that they can then answer the tasks. For example, if your text is about jogging, then obviously they would need the word jogging to be pre-taught at some stage, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get what jogging is. They not necessarily. So that's just an example. Let's look at some ideas for pre-teaching vocabulary. You could have a visual word matching exercise. You could also have students brainstorm and make a list of words or that they think will be in the reading. You could also mime those words for them to guess. That would be also like a diagnostic activity, because if they don't know them, though, obviously you're going to have to give it to them. But very often students know some of the vocabulary, and it's very important that we don't just pre-teach because for the sake of it, because very often the students already have the language. You could also give them a word definition matching exercise or visuals for students to make a list individually and then check whether they had any of that language. Remember that when pre-teaching vocabulary, we're dealing with the meaning only, and so this is done pretty quickly. Now, if we go back and look at the next stage, then we would have skimming or listening for gist, because we would have a text, hopefully a model text, either for speaking or for writing. Obviously we're looking at writing today, so there would be a model text, and we want to make sure that they have a general understanding of that model text before we analyze it in detail, to help them notice key features for then do some writing along the same lines. Let's look at some ideas for skimming or listening for gist. You could have them make predictions, and then after reading or listening, then they check if their predictions were right or wrong. You could give them one true or false question. Remember that for listening, when listening for gist or skimming for gist, we would give them only one question, not a set of questions. Otherwise, we turn the stage into listening for detail or scanning for detail. You could also have them match pictures with extracts, or give them a gist question. Most people ask read the text and tell me what it is about, but lower levels usually need some support. So you could say, read the text quickly and decide whether the text is about A, B, C, and then give them options. You need to make sure that the question can not be answered. The answer to the GIST question is not at the beginning of the text, but that they have to read or listen all the way through before they can actually answer the question. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose. You could also ask them to order pictures of a text, pictures that reflect the text, but they need to read it very quickly. Obviously, some people may argue that that's a scanning task, but not necessarily. They can also read or listen to the text and choose one picture that shows the text, what the text is about. And they could also read and listen to the text and then choose a heading, for example. At the heart of the lesson, which would be the genre analysis, and basically it would be a series of graded questions that focus on the model text, so that we help them focus on the content and language in the model text, so that they can work in pairs. They can work on it in pairs or on their own or in groups, because here what we want to do is we want to guide them through the analysis of the model text that we will ask them to produce later. So we're going through the text, showing and making them notice distinct features of the text that then they will have to produce on their own. Let's look at some ideas for genre analysis. Basically, this is something I did with an elementary class, text types. I showed them this video. Before I showed them the video, I allowed them to look at this task and then make sure that they understood what was required of them. So listen and watch and cross the text type you hear. This is a 1-minute video from BBC Skillswise, so let's check.
We use lots of different types of text in a hotel, for example here in a meeting room, and we do have a conference-evacuation procedure. The point is that these instructions are clear, straight and direct. Here we have a buffet menu. The text is completely different. Even the font of the letters are different to make it more attractive to the guest.
In the bus depot we have different types of text. We use emails where we can communicate with our colleagues quite quickly and informally. We have letters where we can communicate information more formally to people, such as telling somebody that they've been successful and got a job. And we have notice boards where we can put notices up and get information to large groups of our employees quite quickly.
Okay, so after that, then we would check in pairs. They would check their answers, and then I would give feedback. Then the next step would be to make them think of text types. Then I would show them this email, and then ask them what it is and whether it is formal or informal, and also then show them this letter, and then establish that they are letters and that those are emails, so that they start seeing from a very general perspective. It starts narrowing down. I would then give them this email where basically an email that I wrote, and it says is like an introduction. We read it together, and then I give them a task, a reading task for them to complete. So they have to read the email and answer the questions. How do you start an email? Is it formal or informal email? How do you know it is an informal email? And the idea with these questions is that we make them analyze, we make them think about the text type and the format and the layout and the distinct features of emails. Here's the email basically, and after they've read and answered the questions, then we would check. So number 1 is receiver, number 2 then subject heading, number 3 would be the salutation and greeting, then the paragraphs would be the main body of the text, then closing or sign off, then signature, and then postscript. Now, this is the model text that I used in that lesson to make them see what a proper email looks like, and what the different parts is before I actually ask them to produce one. So this is the genre analysis basically. Now let's go back and look at what the next stage is, which is basically the writing task. The writing task then is for them to write me an email, and they need to tell me about them. They need to tell me what they do in their free time, if they have a pet, where they're from, about their family, and about their English language learning experience. Obviously, now they are better prepared to complete this task because they already saw an email, what it looks like, what the different parts are. And in my model text, I give them information about each one of these points, so they know exactly what it is that it is required of them. Obviously, you give them you set a time limit, and in the meantime, you monitor them. Then, once looking at the writing task, so it says sets up a task similar to the model one, to the model analyzed, and gives clear instructions for students to carry out. Now, that's what happens with that task. They need to know exactly what it is, and is usually based on that general analysis that you did, so that they know exactly. You're giving them the tools to be able to complete the task. You would then have a follow-up task, a natural task in relation to the type of writing done. So, for example, the follow-up task would be to write an email to their partner following the same steps as before. It says a natural task in the sense that if you write an email to someone, you would expect a response. So that would be a natural follow-up task, to reply to that email. Or if you wrote a letter, then you would expect a reply to that letter. Or if you wrote a note to Lost and Found Property Office, then you would probably expect a reply from them as well. So you can write an email to your partner following the same steps as before, or they can also talk to their partner about their email they wrote. They can discuss when they write emails, how often, and then so follow-up task could be either a written task again, or a speaking task. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a written task. And remember that usually students come to us, to the classroom, because that's the only place where they can really practicing their English if they're not in a country where they already speak English. So going back, the next stage would be feedback and clarification. So you monitor while they're doing the follow-up task, and then you could give them clarification and some error correction on what they said and wrote. You could have yes, no, true, false questions to double check that they understand what they were saying and the language that they used. You could have A or B questions. You could have some whiteboard work, drawing or tables, etc. You could use timelines. You could have the sentences that they said wrongly, or the language that was wrongly used. You could put it up on the board for them to then check. If we go back then, now those are pretty much the stages of a writing lesson. Now, looking at the times, we would say that pretty much Leadin and Warmer could be around 3 minutes, then pre-teaching vocabulary if necessary, then between 3 and 5, skimming or listening for just about 5 minutes. Remember that all these suggested, that's the key word, suggested timings are in relation to a 40-minute lesson typical of a CELTA course. Obviously, if you have a longer lesson, those times would change proportionally. Now, the genre analysis being the heart of the lesson, the writing task being the heart of the lesson, you would probably spend between 5 and 7 minutes on the genre analysis. If you're not pre-teaching vocabulary, you would probably be able to increase that amount of time. Then the writing task, you would probably have 10 to 12 minutes at least. If it is a longer task or more complex task, then you would probably have more if you're not pre-teaching vocabulary. But in a 40-minute lesson, that's pretty much what you have to, that should be enough for the amount of work that they have to do. A follow-up task could be between 5 and 7 minutes, and then clarification about 3 minutes, for a total of about 40 minutes. Again, these are suggested timings. These are the suggested stages for a lesson where you would have a text-based approach and guided discovery approach, where you show them basically a model text, and you have them work through the text as I did in this sample screencast. So if you had a 1 hour, 1.5 or 2 hour lesson, then you would obviously modify those times proportionally. Okay, well, I hope you found this screencast useful, and that it will help you with planning and writing successful writing lessons. Stay tuned for the next methodology pill, which will be on speaking. Thank you. Bye.